Welcome to Movies Are Terrible. I'm Jeremy. This is 20 Days of Halloween, 20 Days of Horror Movies. When I started this series, I was only reviewing movies that I hadn't seen yet, but then I started thinking this is actually like a really good opportunity for me to go back and revisit some of the horror movies that I love. Plus, I'm working on an episode of Movie Monsters right now that covers slasher films, so I figured the timing was pretty much perfect. On this video, like the thumbnail and the title suggests, I'm reviewing Scream. This movie is directed by Wes Craven. It stars Neve Campbell, Skeet Ulrich, Matthew Lillard, Drew Barrymore, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, Tatum, what's her name? Rose McGowan, and a bunch of other people you haven't heard of since 1995. Anyways, it is the story of a girl named Sidney Prescott, played by Neve Campbell. Sidney's kind of trying to readjust to high school life after the murder of her mother, the unsolved murder of her mother, when all of a sudden a new string of murders starts taking place among high school students. Now it's up to Sid and her friends to basically solve the murder mystery and figure out if this is all related to Sidney's mother's death. Scream is a movie that kind of came on the heels of the slasher era. This genre had pretty much completely disappeared. I guess audiences got sick of seeing the same movie over and over and over again. In fact, throughout the 80s, there were 290 slasher movies. So when Wes Craven decided to return to the genre, he gave us something of a postmodernist approach to the slasher genre in New Nightmare. You thought I was going to say Scream there. It's like a little psych out. So New Nightmare kind of laid the groundwork for a lot of the things that followed in Scream. It's a very meta approach to horror films, and it's very aware of the genre and the tropes that exist within it. Kevin Williamson stepped in, I want to say 2 or 3 years later, with a script for a movie called Scream. Kevin Williamson was a producer that did a lot of those like 1990s teenage kind of soapy dramas. If I'm not mistaken, Dawson Creek, but don't quote me on that. So he came with a very quippy, clever, and young script. He approached Craven with it. Craven really liked the idea of it and signed on to direct it. You guys all know, the killer this time around is Ghostface. And Ghostface is obsessed with horror movies. In fact, when it opens up and he's kind of threatening to kill Drew Barrymore's character, the whole thing is kind of hinged on whether or not she can play horror movie trivia, which I can pretty good, just in case you were wanting to know that. Not only is Ghostface obsessed with movies, but Jamie Kennedy's character is also completely obsessed with horror movies, and at different times through the movie, he acknowledges tropes as well as kind of motifs that come up time and time again in horror movies, including the rules. You know, the don't have sex, don't get high, don't ever say I'll be right back, etc., etc. And it's interesting how Scream is able to kind of strike a balance between using and homaging, between using and homaging a lot of the tropes, and then also subverting expectations on the other end of it. Some people have said Scream is a comedy, but I don't really see it that way. I think it's just self-aware, and that's kind of refreshing, especially after seeing so many slasher movies in the theater and on home video, and then none of the characters in these movies are even aware that there are these movies in pop culture. There's a couple of references throughout several series, including Friday the 13th. Anyways, that's not what we're here to talk about. Upon revisiting this movie, I did find that it was a little more teen drama-y than I remembered it, but the characters are well written. This is a clever movie. The performances are solid, and I really think with all of the Easter eggs and little nods to other movies, that it really does have a reverence for this genre. Thing is, it kind of killed the genre because anything that came after it that was a slasher movie, like I Know What You Did Last Summer, was all of a sudden just a slasher movie. We look forward to things like, we look ahead to things like The Rise of Leslie Vernon, Hatchet, Final Girls, there's other ones, and they're all very self-aware. That's a thing that they kind of all share in common. Cabin in the Woods. And I think that this is all kind of the postmodernist impression that was left by Scream. So Wes Craven really did change the direction of the genre with this film. Also, the reveal at the end of the identity of Ghostface is one of the most intelligent twist endings that I've seen in a movie. I mean, for a long time, you're pretty damn sure you know who the killer is, and then all of a sudden, stab, 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 and dude's dead, and you're like, who the fuck is even left, right? And then the reveal, and you're like, man, that is really smart. And then in true Wes Craven form, because there's one thing about Wes Craven, he might like to murder and torture female characters in his movies, but he always makes some badass chicks. Like, think about it. Last House on the Left. That girl, you know, she had to go through and endure some shit, but she ended up coming out the other side victorious. Think about A Nightmare on Elm Street. Nancy straight up goes home alone on Freddy Krueger at the end of it. I mean, and that's not all. And in Scream, when Sid finally, takes the upper hand, it's one of the most gratifying things that I've seen in a horror film. So as a 12-year-old, when I first saw this movie, I fell in love with it. It changed the way that I looked at genre and also changed the way that I looked at movies. So this is one that's really important in my life. And on a scale of 1 to 5, I am giving Scream a 4 out of 5. Well, stick around if you want to check out more reviews. There are plenty of days coming out until Halloween. Hope you're enjoying your October so far. We are having some fucking beautiful weather. I am going to review A Nightmare on Elm Street. I am going to review some other stuff. Halloween is going to be posted as well, so just keep an eye out for that. And if you enjoyed this video, click that like button. It really helps my self-esteem. And subscribe if you want to keep up with all of the terrible, terrible content. I'm Jeremy. Be terrible.